Good afternoon, YouTube. Welcome to PharettCycle Productions. So finally, I picked up a bike that I've been wanting for a long time. I mean, honestly, this is something that I've had a lot of questions and wondered about for a long time. But there's not a lot of information out there in the modern internet world with the DR350. So for a long time, I was a huge DRZ guy. I love the DRZ 400. It carried my butt across a lot of crazy places, and it was awesome. It was an awesome bike. When I moved on from it, I was kind of feeling like I wanted to try something at the Suzuki world again and having a new dual sport that was that I could take my buddies on and get my brother out of the house, so on and so forth. So I started looking for a DR350, and it turns out these bikes are really hard to find in good condition. But they're pretty old, so that's part of the reason. But it's not as bad as you might think. We're going to do some more review videos today. I just wanted to say, hey, I got a new bike. This is some new content that's coming to the channel. I'm going to be doing a DR350 versus DRZ 400. I am no doubt that Hermit is absolutely going to be stoked about us swapping back and forth with his KLX 400, which is the same thing as the DRZ 400. But I am excited about this bike. All right, so I'll give you guys some B-roll, a little bit of walking around the bike. I'll do some much prettier stuff later in the main review video, but we'll just give a little bit of walking around it and show you what you got. So the things that appeal to me with the DR350, well, offhand from the specs side of things, the bike makes about 30 to 31 horsepower as most people estimate or guesstimate. Some have been as high as 33 horsepower. So I'm guessing the lower end of 30 horsepower is going to be with the regular carb, the CV carb, and the 33 horsepower more than likely is the dirt model with the pumper carb. That's my personal feelings. I don't know if that's completely true, but so the bike makes between 30 and 33 horsepower. It makes about 21 foot-pounds of torque. And that's pretty common throughout everywhere. So that's a pretty great numbers when you look at it. And that's all right around 6,000 RPM. So not a super low end torque. So the other thing that appealed to me about this bike was that they're cheap. They're so cheap. Even with the rising prices of dirt bikes and everything else, the bike is such a great deal. Most can be had for well under $2,000. Anywhere from pretty much $700 to $1,500 is a good range for these. So this one I paid a little bit more for because it's in actually very good condition. Of course, all things from 1990 are going to have some problems, but this one is actually really in very good condition. I have not cleaned it up. I have not done anything to this bike yet. We messed with the fuel screw a little bit just to get a little bit better running at the bottom end. But other than that, this is how I picked it up, and it is immaculate. The previous owner put a ton of work into rebuilding the carburetor, cleaning it up. He put a new pilot jet in to make starting the bike easier. So in a little history about the bike, the DR350 first came out in 1990, so this is the first year. It came out as the DR350s only, so it was only a street legal version. And then in 1991, they added on the dirt versions, which admittedly got better suspension and a pumper carb. So there's some cool differences there. A lot of people kind of down on the DR350s because they do have their forks are not cartridge forks, they're dampened forks, rod dampened forks. I think that's correct. But a lot of people complain about the forks and say that they're not all that great for hardcore riding and whatnot. Now, I want a trail machine, and most of you know that I'm a DS guy. So from what I felt so far on the forks, just messing around in the neighborhood, they feel okay. So they might need a new spring in there. I'll probably replace the seals, do some heavier fork oil, and I think that'll get me to where I want to be. There's also cartridge emulators that you can put in there from Race Tech, which are kind of pricey, but if I'm still not happy with the forks after that, I may go that route as well. The rear of the suspension also is kind of the same way. There's no adjustment for rebound on it on the rear end. It feels okay. It doesn't feel super clapped out, so I kind of feel like these were probably rebuilt, at least the seals were at some point. But Race Tech also makes a gold dial for the rear. Most people rave about it, so we'll probably do that at some point or another. But overall, I don't really have a lot of gripes about the bike. Now, we're going to review it off-road, and we're going to do a whole bunch of stuff with it. but I don't think that it's that as big of a deal. I feel like the front forks feel almost identical to the way that my stock DRZ forks. And everybody talks about how the cartridge forks on the DRZ were way better and a much better improvement. If you put better springs, fork oil, and you put gold valves on a DRZ front fork, absolutely. This is the way that Hermit has his setup, and it is by far the best DRZ that I have ever been on as far as suspension. But that comes at a cost. So stock to stock, I don't think they're much different. The later years in 1998 and 9, the street varies, and I think that's because the later models got electric start. The 1990s up till 94 did not have electric start at all between the dirt or street versions. So this is a kick-only model. The way that it's tuned and the carburetor set up, it's actually not bad to kick at all. Like I said, it's a little bit of a cold-blooded bike, but so far, even in, I think it was 34 degrees the other day, I'm never going to ride in that. It kicked on the third, it started after the third kick. So I don't think that's a bad thing, and I think most new riders will figure it out pretty quick. It's got a little bit of a starting procedure, but I think the weight is going to be right around 286 pounds wet is what they claim for the 1990 models. And I believe it feels relatively light for a dual sport. That is substantially lighter than a DRZ 400. Now, other figures put the wet weight of the DR350 SE, which is the electric start version, at right around 304 pounds. So a little bit of a delta. We'll probably weigh the bike and get a feel for what it actually weighs. So some things were removed over this bike over the years, so it probably might be a little bit off, but nonetheless, it is substantially lighter than a DRZ. It at least feels 30 pounds lighter. So right around the 300 pound mark, and for making 30 horsepower and 21 foot-pounds of torque, that's really good, actually. I think that's pretty fantastic. I think in some ways, Suzuki going to the DRZ 400 weighing 330 pounds plus wasn't the greatest move, and it doesn't make that much more power. I will say the DRZ 400, there's no replacement for displacement, so its low-end torque is substantially higher than the DR350. Like I said, the DR350's torque comes in right around 6,000 RPM. I feel like the DRZ's is probably, you get a lot more torque right around the 5,000 mark. So some of the strange things that are about the DR350S from 1990 is that the rear sprocket is a cush drive. I don't think I've ever seen that on a dual sport. Most of the time you see cush drives on street bikes and things like that. So I'm probably going to do a hard insert for the cush drive to basically get rid of the rubber in there, and because I feel a little bit of flex. It's kind of strange. I have a feeling that the rubber's pretty worn out back there, so there are still some parts availability. With that, I'll segue right into a lot of people will not buy the DR350s because of parts availability. Now, I understand it's an old bike and there are a lot of parts that you can't get for the DR350 anymore, but I'm going to say that that's way overstated. When it comes to the engine mechanical parts, even the suspension parts, springs, all of that stuff that you would need to rebuild one of these pretty much from the ground up, all exists, and there's plenty of it. And even some aftermarket go fast parts, if you will, still exist for this bike, and they're pretty easy to get a hold of. And that is, I was worried about buying this bike because a lot of people said that, but now that I've done a lot of research, that's not a problem. So, you know, that's kind of BS these days. So the bigger concern buying one of these old bikes is if it's going to need substantial work to begin with. So, yeah, the only parts that you're going to have a hard time getting are things like body panels. The original seats, if you want to keep them, to reskin them, that stuff's out there. But the foam may be worn out and you can't really find original seats, but I mean, that's kind of a given. Some of the original taillights and things like that. But there are a lot of substitutable parts on this bike, like the RM250 front fender will fit on this bike. The DRZ 400's actually plastic front headlight shroud actually fits around this bike too. So IMS and Krebs both still make gas tanks for the DR350, brand new. So that's no problem. So there's really not a lot of excuses to buy a DR350 at this point in 2021. There's still plenty of parts for the bikes. You can find even the pumper carbs and the stock carbs brand new, or the CV carbs, sorry, brand new on Amazon. So Yeah, don't let that stop you if you're looking into getting one of these. All right, guys, I didn't want to make this a super long video. This is just kind of an intro to the DR350 and the things that I'm excited about it. And we're going to do some comparisons to the DRZ400. I got a buddy that just bought a KLX 300 brand new, and I can't wait to put this head to head with that. I have no doubt the suspension is going to be better, but I have a feeling the power is going to probably be identical, and so the weight is a little bit less too. And then I also look forward to comparing it to my Beta 390. Unfair comparison, but you know, we'll get a feel for what's the difference between an old clapped out 1990s dual sport versus a brand new Enduro. So you know me, I kind of got away from my roots for a little bit. I like dual sports, cheap dual sports. I had my 2009 DRZ 400 for a lot of years. I sold it with over 35,000 miles on it, and I loved that bike. I took it everywhere. And cheap dual sports and doing things yourself and on the cheap is the best way to get into the sport. And for a while I got into the Beta, and I put some money into it because I rode for a long time and I wanted to do some harder stuff and more technical stuff, and the Beta allows me to do that easier. So going back to my roots a little and getting a cheap dual sport again, that's a buddy bike and that anybody could get into and start riding. I want to kind of go back out into the world and show everybody that if you want to get into this sport, anybody can. They can do it on a budget, and it doesn't have to break the bank. And the community will help you if you need anything with your bikes. I'm always more than happy to help people, you know, fix engines or we go to a buddy's house and meet up and we do some maintenance and stuff. So yeah, I'm pretty stoked about that. So here in a little bit myself, I'm gonna go flush the brakes front and rear on this bike. Both the front and rear brake fluid looks like it is still from the 90s. So we're gonna flush that stuff out, and I'm gonna get ready to get this thing ready for some trail riding. So I'll catch you guys next time. I look forward to seeing you. I have not made enough content on this channel. And yeah, we got to get back out there riding and doing some stuff. I'm real excited. So keep a lookout, guys, and have a good one. Fair face out.